You heard the Minister speak and the Premier speak about 900 requests for delegations and the fact that hundreds and hundreds of delegations were actually held. Those were the chances for you to raise questions or issues that are local to your municipality. Here today, it's issues of general policy interest or issues with a broader geographical impact. So if you do happen to wander down the path and get into a local issue, don't be surprised if I interrupt you and ask you if you can rephrase it, or if not, I'll move on to another microphone. You must start by giving your name, by giving your municipality, and the minister to whom you're addressing your question. That allows a couple things to happen. It allows the people at the back end to focus the camera on the appropriate minister, and allows the minister to get their thoughts together, even if it's brief, because we only give you 30 seconds at the most to phrase your question. Sure, you might need a short preamble, but if you get into a speech, again, don't be surprised if I interrupt you and ask you to get to your question. And if you don't comply, there's a gentleman in the back named Brian, and he knows that if I go like that, your microphone gets cut. Now, if you have a second question, oh yes, I should say, there are no supplementary, there are no two-part questions, there are no multi-minister questions, there's single questions. If you do have a second question, look around for the shortest line of the 5 and scurry to the back of the line. You may just get it in there. Final rule, as always, if the need arises, I reserve the right to make new rules as we go along. So I'd like to introduce those on the stage with me, and I won't give you their full titles, but I will give you their names and their portfolio. On my far left, Jill Dunlop, Associate Minister of Children and Women's Issues. And please don't applaud each one of them. We don't have time for that. Pradmeet Sarkaria, Associate Minister of Small Business and Red Tape Reduction. Bill Walker, Associate Minister of Energy. Longtime friend Ernie Hardeman, Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. Neither of us could remember how long we'd known each other earlier today. Doug Downey, Attorney General. Todd Smith, Minister of Children, Community and Social Services. Vic Fedeli, Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. Stephen Lecce, Minister of Education. Greg Rickford, Minister of Energy, Northern Development and Mines, and Minister of Indigenous Affairs. Jeff Urick, Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks. Rod Phillips, Minister of Finance. Lisa Thompson, Minister of Government and Consumer Services. And of course, on my immediate left, Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Now I'm going to go to my far right. Kinga Surma, Associate Minister of Transportation for the GTA. Michael Tobolo, Associate Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. Peter Bethlen Falvey, Minister of the Treasury Board Secretariat. And beside him, Caroline Mulroney, Minister of Transportation and Minister of Francophone Affairs. Beside her is Ross Romano, Minister of Training, Colleges and Universities. Lisa MacLeod, Minister of Tourism, Culture and Sport. Sylvia Jones, Solicitor General. Raymond Cho, Minister of Seniors and Accessibility. John Yakubuski, Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry. There's the fan club minister. Marilee Fullerton, Minister of Long-Term Care. Monty McNaughton, Minister of Labor. Laurie Scott, Minister of Infrastructure. And last but by no means least, Christine Elliott, Deputy Premier and Minister of Health. So, welcome to the Cabinet Ministers. So I'm going to start with microphone number 1 over here to my left. Your name, your municipality, the minister to whom you wish to address your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Robin Jones. I'm the mayor of the village of Westport, and my question is for the Solicitor General. And on a comment, it's so nice to be able to use that salutation again. The question is on the fire reporting regulation. You know that we were all pleased last fall when the province announced that it would not be going forward with the Liberal government's mandatory fire training and certification regulation because of the financial impact on us. We have been asking for the other troubling regulation on fire reporting also to be revoked given its potential municipal fiscal impact, as well as our fire chiefs deeming that it is unworkable as written. It is due to come into effect on January the 1st, 2020. Madam Solicitor General, can you tell us today that you are planning to cancel the fire reporting regulation soon?
Thank you. It should be on.
Is it on? Excellent.
On. Yep,
so I'm not answering this question this way because your last name is Jones, but that is helpful. I can tell you that I also find the existing regulation to be frankly unworkable, and yes, I do intend to revoke it.
Thank you. Should remind ministers that there is a prize for the shortest answer, so you're in the lead. Microphone number 2, please.
Hello, my name is Elaine McDonald, and I'm from the City of Cornwall. I'm a councillor, and my question is for Carolyn Mulroney, Minister of Transport. We in Cornwall are neighbours to the Mohawk Nation of Akwesasne, a First Nation, and with that First Nation, we're working through what has been called here today the transition period and reconciliation. And yesterday, Chief White Duck invited us to cross a bridge and look at a beautiful floral display and visit his reservation. But I can't find that, or Akwesasne, or any other reservation in the province shown on Provincial Ministry of Transport maps. So I'm hoping that there is a program or an intention in the province to take that most important step in reconciliation in acknowledging the existence of First Nations territories, and I hope the minister can tell me there is one such.
Thank you. Thank you. Minister.
Well, Elaine, thank you very much for your question. Frankly, I'm surprised by the content. I was not aware that this was the case. Certainly making sure that our mapping within the ministry across Ontario reflects First Nations territories within the province should be the case. And so thank you for flagging this very important issue, and I look forward to bringing it back to the ministry.
Thank you, Minister. Microphone number 3, please.
Thank you. Colin Best, Region of Halton, Councillor, Town of Milton. Question to Minister of Environment. This could be the shortest answer. Will you, sir, commit to requiring environmental assessments for new quarry applications and expansions?
Minister Ure.
Thanks very much for that question, and I'm going to take a look at how we can ensure that the quarries and aggregates are working with municipalities through the process. I'm 2 months into the job, and I haven't had the opportunity to do my review of pits and quarries, but we want to make sure that the environmental side is well in play, and that our lands, as part of our Made in Ontario Environmental Plan, lands, water, and air are taken care of, and that would ensure that process is followed completely and safely with regards to opening up new quarries throughout the province. We do understand, though, and recognize that they are a needed function in this province in order to deal with the growing municipalities that we have in this community, and we do need to access their raw materials in order to make the cement, asphalt, etc. that is necessary. So I will be more forthcoming to whether or not we'll make it mandatory for all pits and quarries going forward, but we want to make sure that we are protecting our land and water at the same time.
Thank you, Minister. Microphone number 4, please.
Thank you very much, Nigel. And I'm Gary McNamara, the Warden of Essex County, also a board member of AMO. My question is to Minister Laurie Scott, the Minister of Infrastructure. And my question is, Minister, what is the plan for the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, OCIF, review? And what you think needs to be changed, and given it's been available for some time and it seems to be working?
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much for the question, and I was at the AMO MOU table, I think last week or the week before. We are discussing the OCIF. AMO is a very big part of looking at the program to see, you're saying it's working well. We appreciate that feedback. We want other feedback from your members if there are some changes that need to be made to OCIF to make sure that it's fulfilling its core mandate. I know how critically important it is to municipalities, and I've heard that quite a few times in the last couple of days. So you want stable, predictable funding. We want the right program. So we're consulting with you and AMO at the table to make sure we do have the right program and any changes that need to be done. And that is will be dealt with shortly. It's okay?
Thank you. Microphone number 5, please.
Thank you, Nigel. Hello, ministers. My name is Jennifer Murphy. I'm the mayor of Bonnechere Valley and the warden of the county of Renfrew. My question is for Minister Bethlen Falvey, president of the Treasury Board. Mr. Minister, it appears that the Treasury Board received an extra $1 billion this year in this year's budget. Can you tell us if these monies will be used to find further efficiencies or if they'll be used for provincial operating and capital contingencies?
Well, thank you, Jennifer, for the question, and it's great to be here at AMO. I think I've been led to believe this is the first time the President of the Treasury Board has attended AMO, and I got to tell you, I'm going to be back every year, so it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for that question. You know, we do have a challenge in the fiscal situation in this province. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. And so we are looking at finding all kinds of efficiencies and savings within government, and we're doing it together. We have to do it together. The need is very great. The $1 billion $1 billion that we're looking at, for example, is centralized procurement. And that's something that municipalities have been, I've been in a lot of delegate meetings, delegation meetings today, and that's been terrific, including with you, Jennifer. And we've heard some great ideas on how to modernize government, how to digitize, how to reach remote communities and broadband. Centralized procurement, I'll just talk about that one for just a second. We're looking to save $1 billion a year within 5 years. And that's by using technology to make the procurement process, the supply chain more efficient, more fair, standardized, less red tape, and allow all Ontarians and all providers of products and services to be able to compete for government procurement for government goods and services. And that's without losing one job, by the way. That's the name of finding efficiencies. So Treasury Board is, I like to think of it as the Ministry of Savings and doing things smarter, doing things differently, because we owe it to the people of Ontario to spend their hard-earned taxpayer dollars in the most efficient way. Thank you for the question, Jennifer.
Thank you. Microphone number 1, please.
Thank you, Nigel. Graydon Smith, Mayor of Bracebridge. I have a 7-part local question for all the ministers.
Microphone number, no.
This question is for the Minister of Health, and Minister, I see you over there, and hello. It's a question I ask frequently of you, and I'll ask it again today. You know that medium-sized hospitals in Ontario struggle under the yoke of a funding formula that simply does not work. And I would dearly love to ask another question at this forum someday, but I'll ask this question again. Can we expect relief for medium-sized hospitals and communities in Ontario that are continually forced to run deficit budgets every year?
Minister Elliott.
Yes. We are, shortest answer, but I can tell you this is something that we've heard about repeatedly from medium-sized hospitals and from some of my colleagues that are even on the stage with me right now. This is something that I know is causing serious concerns in medium-sized hospitals. It's something that we are looking at the Ministry of Health, and we are coming forward with solutions very soon.
Thank you, Deputy Premier. I thought you were in line for the shortest answer there for a short while, but anyway, we'll come back to that. Microphone number 2, please.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. Dave Miller, Councillor for the County of Brant, and 0-3 for Minister requests at this conference this year. So, my question is addressed to Minister Phillips, but if he pawns it off on somebody else, I'm okay with that too. I applaud this government's commitment to recognizing and addressing the fiscal budgetary pressures that face Ontario. However, there's another fiscal storm coming soon in the form of public pension obligations. By 2035, OMERS will have 1 worker for 1 pensioner. In an age of negative interest rates on corporate and sovereign debt, our public pension plans are relying on rates of returns around 7% in order to stay solvent. The private sector long ago recognized this unsustainable system and switched from defined benefit pensions to defined contribution benefits. So in light of what I consider an impending recession, is this issue on your radar, and what can be done to avoid the coming iceberg?
Okay, Minister Phillips.
Thank you, Dave, and it is a pleasure to be here at AMO. Obviously, the role that we play from a pension perspective is making sure that, along with the federal government, that the rules are clear and that private pensions can be counted on by all of our citizens who have them, and we obviously also have the Pension Benefit Guarantee Fund in the case where it fails. But the principal opportunity is to ensure that pensions don't fail. So it is an issue that we take quite seriously. We take it quite seriously as an employer. We take it quite seriously as a regulator. And I think there are a number of evolutions in the pension space that the ministry is quite aware of, and we're always interested in hearing about any other creative suggestions. But all of us know that for our employees and for our constituents, the ability to count on a safe retirement, whether they have the benefit of a defined benefit plan or have a defined contribution plan, is something that as both a regulator and as a contributor we have to take very seriously. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. From microphone number 3, please.
Thank you, Nigel. My name is Joe Bacchetti, Deputy Mayor for the town of Tecumseh. My question is for Minister Elliott. Before I address Minister Elliott, I want to thank your government for the recent announcement for the expansion of Highway 3. I am here together with the unified contingent from the Windsor and Essex County, including the Mayor of Windsor and the Ward of Essex County. We heard the Premier say yesterday that $17 billion will be allocated over the next 10 years towards hospital renewal. We desperately need a new facility in our community and have committed $200 million from our municipal funds. We are ready now to move to phase 2 of the planning process. Can you please elaborate on how Ontario is ready to support moving to phase 2 for a regional acute care hospital commitment through this funding?
Okay. Minister?
Yes, well, thank you very much for the question. This is something that I hear about on a regular basis from communities across Ontario. There is a process that is in place, as you know, to move through stages from planning to being approved to start construction. We only have about 15% of the hospitals in Ontario right now that are considered to be in good condition, which is difficult for all of us to manage. But the most important issue in every case when we take a look at new hospital infrastructure is the needs of the patient. Is patient safety going to be affected? Because there are so many different priorities, that has to be the most important question. If we move for new construction or if we move to approved facilities for upgrades, it has to be because the patient's needs are the greatest. So that's the lens that we view every application to move forward with. I can't really comment on a specific hospital project, but I would tell you that that is what we need to look at first to make sure that patients are safe and that they can be cared for in their own communities properly. So thank you very much for the question.
Thank you, Minister. Microphone number 4, please.
Thank you, Nigel. Dennis Doyle, Mayor of Frontenac Island, Chair of the Kingston Frontenac Glenelg Genetic and Health Board. Minister Elliott, thank you for postponing the change to the public health funding formula until next year's municipal budget cycle. We are pleased to hear in your presentation yesterday that you're engaging an advisor to assist in modernizing public health. There's a wealth of knowledge within public health units, and in early June we had representatives from all 35 health units in our annual Alpha Conference held in Kingston. All attendees are interested in actively participating in meaningful consultation to ensure unique differences and natural partner alignments are understood before boundaries are cast in stone. Can you tell us who the advisor is and when will consultations start? Ideally, that should be before our budget cycle starts in a month or so.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for the question, Mr. Doyle. I appreciate your concern about a number of issues. We do have an advisor that we're just finalizing arrangements with. I'm not able to announce this person's name just yet because it hasn't been completely finalized, but I can tell you that this is a person that has significant municipal experience. And so as we may not have completely known about all of the intricacies and complexities that are involved with municipalities and their public health units and how they're quite intertwined, this is a person who will be able to speak with you where you live. This person will be able to come to your communities, understand what's going on with your local public health units and the relationship to the municipality to make sure that we get it right, that we make sure that we understand what the concerns are. We do want to move it forward as quickly as possible, so I would anticipate the consultations will start as soon as we've finalized the arrangement with this person. And we want to make sure that you have significant input on this. We know there is a lot of local knowledge and experience, and we want to understand from you directly what that is and get your input and consultation. As far as the boundaries are concerned, that's also something that we want to hear about. No decision has been made about boundaries as yet. We want to hear from you what would make sense before any decisions will be made. It's about making sure that we work as partners together to come up with the right solution. So thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Microphone number 5, please.
Thank you, Ministers. Crystal Chop, Mayor from Norfolk County. This question is for the Attorney General. As a result of regulations that were introduced by the federal government in 2013 that prevented medical cannabis users from growing their own marijuana, a constitutional challenge was launched, and a federal judge upheld the patient's right to grow their own. The rules were subsequently changed that medical users had 3 choices: buy from a licensed producer, obtain a medical prescription, and either grow their own or have a designated producer who could grow for up to 4 patients grow it for them. Over the past couple of days, I've been shocked at the lack of understanding at the municipal level of the distinction between a licensed producer and a designated producer. And while I appreciate that licensing is properly a federal issue, millions of dollars are being spent on enforcement of illegal cannabis dispensaries that are being supplied by these designated producers who are taking advantage of an egregious loophole in the system. My understanding has always been that if you want to eradicate a problem, you go to the source, and in this case, the source are the doctors that are writing fraudulent prescriptions for sometimes 500 or more plants per patient.
And Madam Mayor, your question will be directed to which of the ministers?
The Minister of Health or the Attorney General?
Well, okay. And your question is?
What is being done to regulate these doctors that are writing fraudulent prescriptions?
Attorney General?
Thank you for the question. I can't answer what's happening with the doctors, but I can tell you that this file is moving very quickly across Ontario and across Canada. We're in constant contact with the federal government to talk about how this is actually rolling out on the ground, and everything from supply to enforcement to the medical versus personal use. Edibles are coming online this fall. It's a very complicated piece. I'm happy to follow up with my colleague, Deputy Premier and Minister of Health, to have this conversation across ministries.
Thank you. Microphone number 1, please.
Yes, my name is Chris Peabody, Mayor of Walkerton, Municipality of Brockton. My question is for Minister Clark. First of all, Minister, I'd like to commend you for the hard work you did touring Ontario and looking for consultation on Bill 108. Many of the changes that you made, certainly as a mayor and as a council, we will use to grow our housing stock in Brockton. So I really appreciate the hard work you did. The question I have is, going forward with those changes, will the ministry look at altering the provincial policy statement? We find in rural Ontario that the provincial policy statement is designed for areas with explosive growth along the 401, and we're finding that the rules in that, as enforced by your ministry, officials down in London, are choking off growth in rural Ontario.
Okay. Mr.
Well,
Clark.
Well, thanks very much for the question. Recently, I was in Niagara and announced that we will be consulting on the provincial policy statement. There is a posting on the environmental registry, and I'd be more than happy to ensure that you have the details so that you can provide comment. It was pretty important during our Housing Supply Action Plan that we get out into communities and hear what they had to say, and overwhelmingly, we heard that our next level of consultation needed to be the PPS. So we're just acting on what we heard in communities right across this province. So I look forward to giving you that detail and welcome your comments.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Microphone number 2, please.
Yes, hello, my name is Nathan Townend. I am from Loyalist Township and I represent the constituents of Amherst Island. And my question is for the Minister of the Environment. Undoubtedly, since the publication of the IPCC report on climate change, no one can be in any doubt about the dramatic and immediate need for reduction in CO2 emissions. A viable planet for future generations is dependent on transition to low to zero carbon economy. This takes time, which is of the essence, and takes concerted political effort. The cost of doing nothing is inconceivable, and municipalities are on the front line of the consequences. What is this government doing for Ontario's part in this global consensus on this imperative demand for humanity?
Okay. Minister Europe.
Thanks very much for that question. And last November, Minister Phillips, in his capacity as Minister of Environment, Conservation Parks, released our environmental plan, Made in Ontario Environmental Plan, which outlines a number of steps that we are taking to protect our land, water, and air. In regards to greenhouse gas emissions, Ontario is already leading the way across the country. We're already 22% below the 2005 levels, and we're well on our way, and our plan spells out that we will attain the Paris targets in 2030 at 30%, which we have moving forward. We have instituted changing the recycling program to get plastics out of our landfills, get plastics out of our parks. Plastics in our landfills, as they're decomposing, are not only possibly toxic, but that in organics decomposing releases methane gas, which is a more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. That together will start lowering those rates. With regards to land and with regards to working with municipalities to ensure that we are having, as I announced last week, conservation authorities focus on their mandate to deal. Number one on their list is natural hazards, particularly flooding, which is ever increasing as the climate is changing. We need to ensure that we are adapting and becoming more resilient, and that is part of our plan going forward is the adaptation. We are doing our part in Ontario with regards to reducing the greenhouse gases, but the climate is already changing. We need to move towards those adaptations. So dealing with flooding, I've spoken to many on the Great Lakes right now. With regards to erosion, we need to ensure that we have a plan in place for all the communities with regards to erosion, and we'll continue moving forward on our plan to meet our targets. We are more than willing, and I'll state it here, more than willing to work with the federal government on making a cleaner, better environment. I wish the federal government was willing to work with us. We submitted our proposals to target the emissions of high emitters in this province so that it works so they are penalized for polluting and also held responsible for lowering their emissions. We have that going forward to the federal government. We hope they accept that as our plan going forward. I know they have their environmental plan focuses on a carbon tax, which does allow the high emitters off from paying that tax. We're targeting the high emitters, and we're ensuring that that people of this province have the proper education and giving them the tools in their communities to lower their waste that is going into our landfill. So I think we're doing well. We're open to further discussions. If you have more ideas, I'm more than happy to have that discussion with you and my policy staff, because we are going to look after environment, and we can believe in a balance. We can have a healthy environment, we can have a healthy economy, we can have healthy municipalities, and we're going to achieve that under our mandate.
Microphone number 3. Thank you, Minister.
Hi, I'm Barry Verbanovich, the Mayor of the City of Kitchener. Thank you to all of you for the efforts you're making on behalf of Ontario municipalities. But my question today is for Minister Jurek. Minister, recently you sent us a letter concerning conservation authorities and a desire to see them return to core business. My question to you has to do with them and the recreation businesses some of them are in particular. What is your intent in this regard? For example, we know some of them are running swimming pools and other amenities. We have others that are leasing lands for things like not-for-profit winter resorts. In both instances, both of these facilities might be better managed by local governments who are responsible for parks and recreational facilities. Would your direction contemplate working with cities and communities to facilitate a transition as part of your direction?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I did send out a letter in follow-up, and it shouldn't be any surprise to anybody. We did pass Bill 108 this past year, which set out conservation authorities moving towards their mandate of dealing with floods, as I mentioned earlier, maintaining and conserving our conservation land, making sure Lake Simcoe continues on its rehabilitation, and protecting our source water areas. So, you know, we're going forward with making those regulations forward. We're going to have consultations coming forward. Municipalities be at the table, conservation authorities, indigenous communities, stakeholders. We'll get, you know, Ducks Unlimited, et cetera, those that are involved with the stewardship of our lands, to ensure that we're moving towards those mandated programs. But it's also an opportunity to have our conservation authorities work more on a transparent and open ground with our municipalities to incorporate or introduce contracts where the people of the constituencies understand what is being paid for the Conservation Authority, and the municipality is willing to pay for it. Right now, I honestly think some conservation authorities are treating municipalities like cash machines, where they will just increase their fees and levies how they do it. So if part of that process going forward, thanks, Dad. No, if that conversation goes forward, where municipalities already have the infrastructure to run these very important activities, and I do want to emphasize that you municipal councils, you councillors and mayors that are here, you're elected by the people to provide what's best for your community and what the community wants, and that should be your decision going forward, not the Conservation Authority deciding what's best for the community, because they aren't held accountable to anybody, and it's time they are going to be held accountable.
Microphone number 4, please.
Thank you, Nigel. Barry Burton, Deputy Warden for the County of Simcoe, and my question is for the Minister of Long-Term Care. As you know, municipal governments play a significant role in providing long-term care to Ontario seniors. Like in many communities, we are dedicated to high standards of quality care and safe environments for our residents. The recent inquiry recommended that the ministry conduct a study on adequate staffing levels. But what we really need is funding to hire the staff that we need to do this. How will your ministry work with AMO and the long-term care associations to ensure that seniors in Ontario can receive the care they need in a safe, secure environment?
Minister Fullerton.
Thank you. This is on? Good. Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate all the good work that the municipalities do and the long-term care home sector. We are a government that is fully committed to long-term care, and you can see that with a standalone Ministry of Long-Term Care. And I've met with about 30 delegations in the last 48 hours, and I know how important this is. If we look at Justice Galise's report that just came out a few weeks ago, we took those 91 recommendations to heart. And for those recommendations, to address those recommendations, we are committing new funding to address many of those issues. And we are also committed to the 15,000 new beds and redeveloping another 15,000 beds, and that requires staffing. And we've been listening to our sector. We understand their needs, and we'll be making sure that we do everything possible to address the recommendations in Justice Scalise's report, and that includes staffing and safety issues for our most vulnerable populations. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Microphone number 5, please.
Thank you. My name's Anna Hopkins. I'm a councillor with the City of London, and my question goes to Minister Mulroney. First of all, thank you for keeping the provincial gas tax program. That money goes a long way to moving people around our city. Municipalities also need to know the future of this program. We need to know how to plan. And my question is, you've announced a review of the gas tax fund. Can you share any details, when the consultation will start, and what criteria will you be using to evaluate this program? Thank you.
Okay. Minister Mulroney.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, as you know, in the budget we committed to reviewing the gas tax program, which is well received by many municipalities. I have to say I didn't hear as much about it at AMO as I thought I would, but I did hear certainly, and I know that Associate Minister Surma also heard the same, a need to continue with this review in an organized way. And so what we propose to do is to work through the AMO MOU table to seek feedback from AMO members on the specifics of the changes that they would like to see. Really, we're looking at the funding process, and I think that one of the things that we've heard is consistency is something that municipalities are looking for. But I think in terms of the process for the review, what we would do is the next step would be to reach out to the AMO MOU table, perhaps draft a survey or set of questions and parameters, and then get that feedback in. I know that municipalities are anxious for some clarity on this, so it's not something that we plan on delaying. It's something we will move to quickly, and we'll have a clear timeline for the review, and so that you can get your answers in the fall.
Thank you, Minister. Microphone number 1, please.
Hello, my name is Brandon Posthuma. I am a municipal councillor for Oliver Papoonj, and as many of you know, we are home to the beautiful provincial park of Kekabeka Falls. My question today is about cannabis use and alcohol use in provincial parks. So I'd like to direct this question to our Solicitor General, Sylvia Jones, and if anyone would like to comment, I would really appreciate it. With the federal decision to legalize cannabis, there's been many issues that arise at the provincial park. People feel the need to hide down trails in the forest using recreational marijuana and alcohol, as we do not have a approved safe space or consumption space at the park. This is leading to issues such as fire hazards, as well as litter along trails, beaches. We're finding quite a bit of it throughout the park. Now, the federal government has put this on us, and I would like to know, is there any conversation that we can partake in, one, to protect the park, protect our citizens in situations like this fire hazard, and two, how can we use this situation for potential economic growth, being that we're located outside the city of Thunder Bay, along the border of Minnesota. We see huge potential here, and I would like to know if this is a conversation that is being had.
And this question applies not just to your park, but to many parks. Madam Solicitor General?
Thank you. You know, you've touched on a lot of issues with that question because for me, as a parent, I believe that our parks are a tourism opportunity, but they are also, for me, a family-friendly place. And I am very concerned when I hear and learn about alcohol abuse and cannabis use in our public spaces. I think that, to your point, we need further clarity from the federal government on how we can move forward. We are actively engaged in those conversations, but frankly, it is frustrating sometimes when these issues are imposed upon us without enough thought to how it actually impacts our public spaces and our tourism opportunities. I personally would like to see more involvement at both the federal level and, frankly, feedback from our fellow ministries on how we can best approach it, because I am not comfortable with the program where people are hiding their use. And frankly, if we want to be clear on when it is appropriate to use cannabis and use alcohol, whether that's in a public park, in a vehicle, we need to step up and do a better job to make sure that our public understands when it is appropriate and when it is not. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Microphone number 2, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Michael Pleshy, Region Appeal, City of Brampton. My question is for Minister Clark. Minister, the regional review is hanging over the heads of a lot of politicians that inhibits their ability to make serious decisions that affects people's lives on a day-to-day basis. It was unfortunate that we were supposed to have an announcement prior to today, and it's been conveniently and by way of perception punted off until after the federal election. Are you guaranteeing that in November, is that decision going to be made? And is that decision going to be made in a public way with your rationale in the most transparent way?
Okay. Minister Clark.
Thank you for the question. You know, again, I've been unequivocal that I did not expect to have such a robust consultation. Let's review the Housing Supply Action Plan, which I touted had 2,000 submissions, 85% from the public. I thought that was fantastic. We've got 8,500 submissions on regional government, some very technical plans that were submitted at some of the meetings that took place in regional council chambers in the affected communities. The one thing that I want to do, given the fact that I've got 2 extremely well-respected individuals in the municipal space, in Michael Fenn and Ken Seeley, is I want to take my time. The recommendations will be presented as confidential advice to Cabinet. I'm going to take my time, as I've said many times in the past, to review it with my Cabinet colleagues, and it's certainly my intention, as I said in my speech, as I said at Lumco, as I said at Marco, as I said to the municipalities that have asked me, that I'm very hopeful that we'll have those recommendations and the path forward this fall. That's my plan. That's what I've said. Haven't changed my mind. That's the way we're going to move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Microphone number 3, please.
Karen Ray, City of Markham, and I'm here with Karen Selovitz from the City of Richmond Hill. Question is to Minister Clark regarding Bill 108. We were both part of the OMB Reform Working Group led by the now Mayor of Aurora, Tom Maracas, and seated here today with many of the members of that committee. When the OMB was abolished, it received all party support and unanimous support. We all felt that our official plans should be upheld and local councils should have the final say on how to grow and planning applications. So why are we now reverting back to the OMB rules and specifically de novo hearings?
Minister.
So when I took office, we made it very clear that we were going to look at the complete approvals process. We started with the growth plan. We had a number of meetings while many of you were campaigning last fall for municipal election, tabled draft regulations, had more consultations, decided to have consultations for the Housing Supply Action Plan. You will remember that one of the 5 issues was, well, there were speed, cost, mix, rent, and innovation, but speed was one of them. We have a tremendous amount of cases that are stuck in one of the tribunal systems. I said last year that I would hope that I didn't have to create any more LPATs, but I was wrong. As part of the consultation, I needed to create a 3rd system, which again I hope isn't going to take very long. I'm hoping very soon it can move to a 2nd system and ultimately back to a 1st system. I believe, and you may disagree, and I respect your right to disagree, that I believe I've taken some pretty good measures from both the system that was in place prior to Bill 139 and elements of Bill 139. Obviously, time will tell. I'm working with the Attorney General on the transition regulations, but a year from now, you can tell me how I do. But if we're moving forward, we're moving now onto the provincial policy statement, and my review will continue on all elements of the development approval process. We need to create the opportunities in this province where we can build housing, where we can sustain economic growth, and we can move our province forward. And that's the commitment I made to the Premier, and that's the commitment I made to Ontarians. So we'll move forward, and you can judge me next year.
Thank you, Minister. Microphone number 4, please.
Thank you so much for taking my question. My name is Shelby Chung, and I am from the municipality of Thunder Bay. My question is for Solicitor General Sylvie Jones. It's regarding policing regulations. Madam Solicitor, we are aware that there are hundreds of regulations that need to be developed soon to allow the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019 to come into force. You used a municipal fiscal impact lens on the fire regulation you have revoked. Will you continue to use the municipal financial lens as these policing regulations are being written so that the public and officer safety is upheld while being very prudent with taxpayer dollars?
Okay. Solicitor General.
Thank you. The lens that I'm using in the regulation preparation, which has already begun with stakeholder engagement, is to make sure that we continue with the balance and the pathway of what I believe we have struck with the Comprehensive Ontario Police Services Act. Look, I'm not going to rush the regulations because I know how important it is to keep our communities safe. We are actively engaging with police organizations, with municipalities, with AMO at the MOU table. We have brought together the individuals and the organizations who I believe make the most important piece of community safety, which is our municipal partners, which is our policing partners, chiefs of police. They are all at the table now, and my assurance to you and to this room is we are going to take the time to get it right, and we are going to make sure that the feedback that we receive is shown up and articulated when the regulations come forward.
Thank you. Microphone number 5, please.
Merci. Bonjour. My name is Dominique O'Rourke, and I'm a city councillor from Guelph. My question is for the Minister of Transportation, Madame Mulroney. So I just want to expand on the question raised by my colleague from London regarding the gas tax and transit. So expanding high-quality transit in our communities is really vital to help us reach our economic, environmental, and social goals that the province tells us that it shares. So the government did not expand the gas tax fund as it had committed, and we are looking forward to that, the review. I'm just wondering, in addition to the response that you gave to my colleague from London, will we, along with our transit agencies, have an opportunity to be meaningfully involved?
Thank you. Minister?
Merci beaucoup pour la question. Thank you very much for the question. Absolutely. As part of the conversations Minister Surma and I already had through our delegations, we heard loud and clear on this issue and many other issues that municipalities and agencies within municipalities were interested in being engaged in a meaningful way as part of the review process. And so as part of the review that we will do, we will look for ways to reach out to engage your agencies in a meaningful way. Yes.
Thank you. Microphone number 1, please.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Rick Maloney, Deputy Mayor of the Town of Bracebridge. My question is to the Minister of Infrastructure, Minister Laurie Scott. Minister, municipal governments and residents have been waiting for some time to access the shared municipal, provincial, federal funding through Investing in Canada infrastructure plan. And we know yesterday the Premier announced that the intake for the community, culture, and recreation part of that plan is going to be opened up September 3rd. And I will say from a municipal perspective, like the town of Bracebridge, where we're trying to replace a 110-year-old library and a 70-year-old arena, we thank you for that opportunity to make application. That being said, Minister, there are other funds that have yet to be released, and my question to you is, when will the ICIP money for green infrastructure be released to municipalities to access?
Okay. Mr. Scott.
Good. Thank you very much for the question. I'm looking around the corner to see you. So we were very happy to announce the Ccr Funding Intake will be September 3rd. The Premier announced it yesterday. That's the third program and stream that's been opened up. And right now we have 350 projects that have been nominated to the federal government from the rural and northern roads, public transportation, both inside the GTHA and outside the GTHA, and community culture and recreation. So I know the green stream is anticipated, and I can tell you that it will be opened up this fall. We are balancing the intakes. The former Minister of Infrastructure is right here on my right, Minister McNaughton, so I thank him for being involved and happy to follow in his footsteps. But the green stream, which is the last stream, will be opened this fall, and we are very much encouraging the federal government to approve those 350 nominated projects that they have on their desk now. And as the municipalities and streams open up, more nominations will be coming forward. And I say to you, the earlier you can get the nominations in for the CCR, the better, and the same when the green intake comes in. So it'll be all wrapped up by the end of this year.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. Microphone number 2, please.
Yes, Mayor Alan Thompson, Chair of Rural Municipalities of Ontario. This is to Minister Scott. I want to say thank you for the funding announcements for broadband. The challenge we do have is it's very helpful to our communities. In our communities, we have a lot of fiber that's either owned by Bell, Rogers, the railways, Hydro One. Nobody wants to share. So in order to collaborate, get them to collaborate, we need to make broadband essential service, very similar to what Adam Beck did to Hydro 100 years ago. Can you please make broadband an essential service so we can get our communities connected?
I said it's a top priority. We're going to leverage $1 billion in
Minister Scott, I think that's a popular question.
Thank you very much. Minister McNaughton said you mentioned that last year too, so it's consistency. Thank you. Absolutely, it is critical to us. $315 million we've announced. This needs to help leverage the private sector up to $1 billion. I know from my own riding and representing them for many, many years, it is, one of the top priorities is increasing broadband and cellular capacity. We have some requests going out under SWIFT that have been RFPs for some communities. EORN is looking at them. We've announced the $150 million, which is going to be an intake by the Ministry of Infrastructure itself. So we, heard a lot of meetings this last few days with ideas, and really, much to your earlier comments, what is in the ground, what is available to use. We're actively wanting to leverage what is already in your communities, and then, with the stimulus for underserved and unserved communities, because I know many in the room right now don't even have any broadband or cell service in their communities. So we have been rolling out the programs, wanting to leverage, speaking with what public entities and private entities that we can. So bring in the ideas, what's there in your community, how do we leverage, and there is no question it's a top priority. And as the program name says, we want to bring everybody up to speed. Okay. So thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. Before I go to microphone number 3, we have just over 21 minutes left. We have about a dozen people still at the mics. To the extent that you can be brief, both up here and out there, we may get to everybody, but just to let you know, on average, you probably won't. So microphone number 3.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nigel. Hello, folks. My name is Mason Ainsworth. I'm a councillor with the City of Orillia, and my question is for the Assistant Dunlop, MPP Dunlop. But before I get to that, I just wanted to thank all of you for being here today. We really do appreciate in this room that you take the time out of your busy schedules to be here before us.
Yep.
And my question for MPP Dunlop is in regards to, I know you're in your past, you've been very involved in the skilled trades portfolio, and now with your new position, congratulations on that. How are you going to get women in our province more involved with the skilled trades?
Great, thank you very much for the question, Mason. And I must say, I feel like a child in a school play up here. My mom's in the front row here cheering for me, taking pictures.
So this has been a topic that my colleagues can agree that I've been very passionate about, and I was raised in a family of plumbers, and my grandparents started a small business in my hometown of Coldwater that's been running for some 60 years now and has employed hundreds of people from the local community. So I see the value of skilled trades and the opportunities for a great profession. We can all agree in all of our communities across Ontario, there's a skilled trade shortage. And in fact, it's estimated that just by next year, there's 190,000 available jobs. And looking ahead to 2030, an estimated 560,000 jobs will be available, looking at the number of people retiring. So I just had this chance to have a conversation this morning with Patrick McManus, who is with the Ontario Skilled Trades Alliance, and we were talking about how to increase the opportunities for women in trades. And looking in my ministry, we actually fund a program called Women's Enterprise Security Program. And I visited Sudbury's College Boreal a couple weeks ago and got to see firsthand the work that was being done at the college. So it's a 3-year funding program, and in this specific college, they're looking at the carpentry, the pre-apprenticeship program. And this program not only offers the pre-apprenticeship program, but also the mandatory wraparound supports for women who may typically be in low-income positions. So looking at childcare, housing, travel, budgets for clothing, etc. So just those pieces alone, and working across ministries as well. You'll see recent announcements where we're looking at skilled trades in the Ministry of Education as well as Ministry of Training, Colleges and University. So a real cross-ministerial approach to increasing women in trades as well as increasing all people in trades. So we have a great opportunity here for a very fulfilling career, and I look forward to working with my fellow partners in the ministries as well as to our community partners. Thank you very much for the question.
Thank you. Microphone number 4, please.
Thank you, Nigel. Alan Alls, Mayor of the Town of Erin. My question is for the Minister of Environment. The government has been very public about making changes to the environmental assessment process in Ontario. The current process is slow, antiquated, and very costly to municipalities that are working hard to save money. My question, Mr. Minister, is when can municipalities see some real progress towards streamlining the EA process across Ontario that at present is having tremendous direct and indirect costs to the taxpayers?
Thank you. Minister Yurk.
Thanks very much, and we're going to pick up where Minister Phillips left off. I think he made quite a bit of leeway or transitioning to making the environmental assessment streamlined and ensuring that additional costs aren't added on. And we're continuing that work. Right now my ministry is undergoing further review of the environmental assessment. I'll have more to announce later this fall, but our plan is to ensure we are protecting our environment, but at the same time not downloading with so much excessive red tape that it stalls development, but at the same time adds multiple layers of cost, not only to yourself, but to taxpayers in general, and also businesses who are trying to invest in our communities.
Thank you, Minister. Microphone number 5, please.
Thank you. My name is Laura Yip. I'm a regional councillor representing St. Catharines in the region of Niagara. My question is for Minister Clark. I know that you're well aware of the housing and homelessness crisis that is occurring in the province and how it's impacting some communities more than others, particularly when you take into consideration the opioid crisis and other addiction and mental health issues. Considering that the funding model for the Community Homelessness Prevention Initiative does not take into consideration population and demographic changes that have occurred over the life of the program, will you commit to undertaking a municipal comparison to confirm the refined needs of municipalities to ensure the fund is distributed equitably?
Thanks. Thank you very much for that question. The one thing that we looked at, given the fact that we're in a challenging fiscal environment, is we need to keep our housing programs as flexible as possible. And we certainly have been working with our local service managers. As all of you know, those are the people on the ground. They know the housing needs in your community better than I do. So I look to some of those service managers to give us advice on program design and program redesign. Obviously, as part of our community housing renewal strategy, we want to take any innovative ideas you have and try to put them into practice. So, I pledge to you that my door is open. If you want to sit down and provide me the numbers that you think justify what you're saying, I'd be more than happy to give you the time to discuss it. But I want to stress to everybody in this room that housing is a shared responsibility. We need to work collaboratively at all three levels of government. We need to work with the private sector. We need to work with nonprofits. Anyone that wants to create a housing opportunity for those that are most in need, we need to start telling our service providers and our local councils that we need to think out of the box, and we need to know that the province of Ontario is a willing partner for your ideas and for your suggestions. So I look forward to meeting with you.
Thank you, Mr. Microphone number 1, please.
Thank you. My name is Dave Bilsma. I'm the mayor of West Lincoln. It's a rural municipality, so this question goes to the Minister of Agriculture. And I didn't want to leave you out, so I hope you can entertain my question. Mr. Hardeman, one of the challenges that we face as a rural municipality is the production of cannabis at a large scale. Recently, in the month of June, a local school had to keep its kids inside because the prevailing winds were blowing noxious smells, skunk smell, into the schoolyard, and so the staff thought it best to stay inside. Is there can we get a commitment or a plan in place to, from a planning perspective, an MDS or minimum distance setback? Is that something that we can use in our toolbox to control the placement of larger or medium-sized growing operations for cannabis?
Minister Hardeman.
Well, thank you very much for the question, and I thought we were going to have this afternoon, like the normal question period at Queen's Park, that no one had a question for the Minister of Agriculture. But thank you very much, and I think it's such an important question because we've been hearing a lot of things and challenges that we're facing about where it's being grown. I just want to point out that the growing is strictly licensed by the federal government. The provincial government and our ministry has the responsibility to make sure that where it is grown in a field, that it is just another crop and we can't regulate where they can grow it in an agriculture field. But we can regulate where it can be grown if it's in the greenhouse and so forth adjacent to build up areas under the Planning Act, where you can regulate what can be built and how it must be built in order to accommodate the challenges you face doing that. At the end of the day, I think what's really important is that the federal government, when they made it legal and decided to take over the responsibility of licensing, they didn't put anything in place that put those restrictions on the licenses so we could control what is be grown in the field. We did, as Ministers of Agriculture, immediately upon being appointed over a year ago, we made a decision collectively of all the agriculture ministers in Canada. We made collectively that cannabis would not be considered a crop under these support programs because obviously we didn't see it was quite like agriculture in that way. But having said that, we do not have the power, and in fairness, I don't believe we should have the power, if it's an agriculture crop, to restrict how people who are growing an agriculture crop, how they grow it in their fields.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. Microphone number 2, please.
My question is for the Minister of Education. My name is Delynn Patterson, and I'm a councillor from the Township of Ryerson. Minister Lecce, I understand that this government is concerned with the EQAO results of our public schools. Teachers are concerned about what's happening in their classrooms. Too many of our public school teachers are leaving at the end of the day feeling devastated that they have not met the needs of all of their students. Our teachers and support staff work with the students with special needs, students with individualized education plans, students who suffer from PTSD, students who have emotional, social, mental needs. The teachers and support staff have to ensure that the students have something to eat, adequate clothing. They then have to take care of the trauma caused to their students and to themselves when a student has spit, kicked, slugged, yelled, or screamed obscenities at them. What is the minister going to do and when about these outside forces that interfere with a teacher's ability to teach?
Thank you very much, Councillor, for your question. I think where we certainly agree is that our educators work very hard and our support staff work very hard in the classroom They nurture talent, they optimize potential, and they deserve the respect of all governments and all peoples, and they do in this ministry and in this government. I would submit that a great challenge I'm hearing from a lot of stakeholders is safety of educators and support staff and students in the classroom. And we have put in place new resources, new support and professional development to ensure that our schools and our children remain safe. Moreover, when it comes to parents who have an important role to play in education, our government believes that they have to have a say. And we have ensured that parents are a guiding light when it comes to decision points we make on the safety of their kids and how we regulate classrooms, how we maintain safety inside and outside the classroom and playground, all the way into the classroom itself. We are announcing a physical health curriculum in short order that will underscore that principle of safety in everything we do, from cyberbullying, online victimization, to new predatory actions that affect our young people. So across the ministry, across the board, across the government, we're embracing the principle of safety for our kids to ensure that that parents have confidence when their kids are in the classroom, they remain safe, and that our educators too remain safe in the work they do.
Okay. Thank you for answering the question, Minister. I need to remind you that it should be of general municipal interest. Microphone number 3, please.
Yes, my question is for Minister Mulroney. I'm Greg Davidson, Mayor of the Township of Mapleton, past Chair of the Wellington County Safe Communities. A few years ago, automated speed enforcement was passed in the legislature to help prevent or protect our citizens in school zones and safe community areas. Minister, when will this program's regulations be completed so municipalities can start implementing this enforcement option?
Minister.
Thank you, Greg, for the question. Obviously, safety is the #1 priority in my ministry, and we want to work closely with municipalities on this issue. I understand that municipalities have selected a vendor and for camera technology this summer, and so we'll be expecting that we'll be in a position to be operational later this year.
Thank you, Minister. Microphone number 4, please.
Merci, Nigel. Mon nom est Nicole Fortier-Levesque, maire de Moonbeam. My question is directed to Minister of Health, Mrs. Christine Elliott. The provincial government is moving toward transforming healthcare delivery by replacing the LHINs by Ontario Health Teams. You have received over 150 applications across different regions of the province, and not all of them will qualify. How are you going to determine who is going to qualify, since the realities are different from one region to the other, especially in Northern Ontario?
Thank you. Minister Elliott.
Well, thank you very much for the question. We were tremendously encouraged in receiving over 150 applications from groups that wanted to become local Ontario health teams. We have selected at this point 31 groups. We thought we would maybe have 7 to 10. We actually found 31 groups that are ready to move to the full application process. Others may only have small things that they need to fulfill in order to move to that process, so we're encouraging everyone to move forward with it. It's also been received from all parts of the province, so it's not just in one specific area or another. And what we're finding is the health providers are very enthusiastic about proceeding. They already know where the gaps in service are. We want to create a system of healthcare in Ontario that is truly centered around the patient. And that's not happening right now, and the providers see that. They see where people get shut out almost from the healthcare system, where we want them to be maintained by the system and supported all the way along. So the healthcare providers are already working to fill in the gaps, some of them despite some of the impediments that the Ministry of Health has put in the way. What we want to do is take away those artificial boundaries and let local healthcare providers be able to determine what's best for their own geographic area. What we have found up until now is that when decisions are made just by Queen's Park, it doesn't work out so well. We know that it needs to be based on local teams doing the local work on the ground, who know what the issues are, who know what the gaps are, and who know how to fill those gaps. So it's really, really encouraging looking forward. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Minister. Microphone number 5, please.
Thank you. My name is Sue Foxton. I'm the Mayor of North Dumfries, Regional Councillor of Waterloo, and Chair of TAPMO, which is the top aggregate producing municipalities of Ontario. And I'd like to address the Minister of Natural Resources and Forests. I thank you, Minister, for inviting me to your aggregate summit. I was the only politician invited, and it was because of my role as the Chair of TAPMO, and I do consider that an honor. I am attempting, but several of my colleagues felt left out. And I believe working together as partnership with the province, with TAPMO, and with OSSGA, Ontario Stone, Sand and Gravel, we can come to some mutual situations that will make us all stronger and better. I'm hoping that you will consider the invitation to a forum of municipalities, the ministry, and TAPMO and OSSGA, so that we can make some resolutions come forward and make us all stronger. And an afternote, I have met with many of you ministers, and I must say I'm very proud and honored to have met you. I believe your hearts are in the right places. I may not always agree with what you do.
You're taking time from the next
done.
questioner.
I'm done.
Minister Yakubuski, I think there's a question there that you can address.
Well, thank you very much, Sue, and it was a pleasure to meet you and chat with you in Caledon back in March at the Aggregate Summit, which we specifically held for aggregate producers. You were invited as yes because of your role at TAPCO, Top Aggregate Producers of Ontario. We'll get that right. And also, Alan Thompson was there as the host mayor as well. We had a great summit, and we have embarked upon our process of aggregate reform to the Aggregate Resources Act. I met with AMO executive, Minister Clark, invited me to their monthly meeting. I guess it was the last one. We had a great chat. Lynn Dolan was leading the discussion on behalf of AMO at that meeting. We recognize that we are partners with municipalities because every one of those pits, other than the ones up in Northern Ontario and some unorganized territories, are within your boundaries. And we do absolutely want to continue to work with you because that is a resource that, quite frankly, the municipalities of the province of Ontario are actually the biggest user of aggregate, and us as the province comes number 2. So it's none of us would be here today. We wouldn't have been able to get here if it wasn't for aggregate. It's an absolutely necessary and vital resource to the province of Ontario, and working with our municipalities, and you're going to be hearing more from us about the next stage of engagement and consultations before we made that commitment at the AMO meeting, that before we move ahead, we will have further discussions with municipalities here in the province of Ontario. You are our partners and will continue to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Microphone number 1, please.
Thank you. My name is Bill Gordon, first-term councillor at Midland, Ontario, and my question is for Minister Clark. It's a short planning question, if there's such a thing. Earlier this year, you sent municipalities a letter advising of impending changes to the Planning Act and the provincial policy statement. Your advice was to consider a pause on the submission of any new official plans. As a municipality that's a new draft OP ready to go, with some nagging issues surrounding natural heritage designations, has your position changed, or do you still advise that we continue that pause and that process pending news from your ministry?
Yeah, well, and it's a great question. I'll try to give you a short answer. So I mentioned earlier in this forum that we're doing the consultation for the provincial policy statement. We've also got a number of other notices on the environmental registry asking for public comment. We certainly want you to work with our office, and I encourage you to reach out to your municipal services office so that we can have a discussion. But we do want to finish the PPS. We do want to get your comments, and we do want to move forward on some of those changes. So I'd love to talk to you offline so that we can get another question.
Thank you, Minister Clark. Microphone number 2, please.
Thank you, Nigel. Wendy Landry. I'm the president of Northwestern Ontario Municipal Association, also a member of the AMO board and the executive. My question is for Minister Mulroney today, but hopefully have the support of the rest of the cabinet that are present today. Northwestern Ontario, we've been forced to reinvent ourselves over the year with the collapse of the forest industry and with our communities on the downturn of that industry who were relying on that industry to survive. Lately, we've heard of the announcement of Bombardier laying off over half of their employees, and we hope with the recent announcements with increase in Metrolinx that we would have your commitment of the open for business from your government and the commitment of a mandate of Made in Ontario to support our Bombardier plant in Thunder Bay to ensure that we can keep our 1,200 families and workers fed and continued working.
Mr. Mulroney, you wish to comment?
Thank you, Wendy. Yes, the Premier commented on the support that our government would give to Metrolinx in continuing its negotiations with Bombardier on more cars to be built out of the Thunder Bay plant in order to support employment at that plant for a certain period of time. And so Metrolinx is continuing that negotiation, and I understand that the talks are going well. I can't comment any further on that, but our government has been very clear that we wish to support Metrolinx in that negotiation.
Okay. Now I have some good news and some bad news for you. The bad news is our time is up. The good news is that you've managed to pose and deal with 32 questions, which by my reckoning is a record. So congratulations and thank you very much. Minister Clark.
I too want to thank everyone for their questions and comments. I want to thank my colleagues for taking time out of their busy schedules to support Ontario's municipal partners. And I also want to ask that you give Nigel Belchamber a big round of applause for his moderation. Oh yes, you got it. That's right.
Minister, in my haste, I forgot the prize for the shortest answer. It actually was still the first answer. It was Solicitor General Sylvia Jones. So, and it says, I don't know where I got it. It's a lovely pen. It says, "I love Niagara Falls."
Thanks, everyone. That concludes the session. We welcome you in the Ontario reception. Have a nice evening. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for your attending this conference, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning at our main stage sessions in the West Inn Hotel.